Roxo Media House.
Welcome back, everyone, to the National Championship edition of Facing the Frogs. I'm Jamie Plunkett here alongside Coach David Beaudin, and we are going to break down some game film of the Georgia Bulldogs today because, Coach, TCU made it to the Natty.
Yeah, baby. So this is it. We've been, when we started this journey here in these purple chairs, we were kind of hoping, maybe against hope, that we we're going to have this moment here, but we're fortunate enough to do it after that big Fiesta Bowl win, Jamie. So fired up to get into this one. This is a good Georgia football team.
A very good defending national championship
Yes.
Georgia Bulldog team that took on and defeated Ohio State in the Peach Bowl, the other college football semifinal, while our Horned Frogs were beating up on Michigan in the Fiesta Bowl. Georgia actually had to come back in that game, Coach. They were down by double digits in the second half. Ended up coming back and then used a missed field goal by Ohio State to hold on to the win, 42-41, pretty much right as the new year was rung in, which is kind of a cool thing. If you haven't seen that on Twitter, go and check that out as well. You can see Ohio State's kick miss right as the ball drops in New York. It's a fun little synchronization there. But, Coach, TCU has one more football game this year. That's it. We know for sure. And if they win it, they're the national champions. We've talked about this team throughout the season. You've done a lot of really great work on Dissecting the Frogs. Another excellent episode of Dissecting again this week, looking at that win over Michigan. But now TCU faces what is not even remotely close, their toughest opponent of the year in Georgia. We're going to take a look at, I believe, 8 offensive plays from Georgia's game against Ohio State and 9 defensive plays. I might have flipped those numbers. But what can you tell me just at the surface as we jump into film today about the Georgia Bulldogs?
Yeah, we're going to start with the defense, and co-defense coordinator Will Muschamp. People in Texas might be familiar with him. His time as a DC, Mac Brown winning a national championship at Texas. Before that, he's been with Nick Saban at LSU and with the Dolphins, and then more recently was a head coach at Florida, of course, at South Carolina before he moved over. He's a teammate of head coach Kirby Smart at Georgia back in the day, and so those two are really close. And then the other defense coordinator is a guy named Glenn Schumann. He's got a little different path. He's come from Alabama with Kirby Smart. He started off as an undergraduate assistant, was a GA, moved into more of a personnel role, and then when Kirby got the head job at Georgia, he brought him over as an inside linebacker coach. He's now been promoted. I think they're trying to hang on to him after the departure of Dan Lanning. Of course, is the head coach now at Oregon. But this is a group that's not only everyone talks about the talent on this team, the size, the speed, and they're right in doing so, right? It is across the board to a man. They don't budge when they take a guy on those metrics, right? It's really out of the playbook of Nick Saban. When you're trying to recruit guys, and really when you're at Alabama and Georgia, you're almost drafting guys rather than recruiting.
Yeah.
But those measurables, when they look at them, at each position they have a list of measurables, and they will not budge an inch. They will not budge a pound or a tick of speed. And you can see that here, But in addition to all that, really good scheme and really well coached. So we'll take a look at that right now, Jamie. We'll just kind of jump right into it, if that's all right.
Coach, as we jump into the film here, I know that TCU fans probably know the name Jalen Carter. He's one of their big defensive linemen on the interior there, but Georgia's defensive front goes way deeper than just one guy.
Yeah, it sure does. I mean, you look at – so Jalen Carter's here. You can see him, just his athleticism right off the top. Guy out of Kennesaw, Georgia, is from there and sits at 6'3", 300 pounds, and moves like he's an H-back tight end in the way he moves. But then the other guy right next to him, inside it there, number 78, Nazor Stackhouse, and his last name is very apropos. He sits at 6'3", 320 pounds, and I think they might have shaved off a few pounds, to be honest with you. But, that's just kind of what you get. You're going to see across the board. In this first play, they're getting lined up. Ohio State goes trips. They motion over to 2x2, and they're still kind of getting set. Very uncharacteristic for that Georgia defense. But, Ohio State does a nice job early in this game just getting the ball out. And, of course, this was a big loss in this game. They had Marvin Harrison Jr., of course, his dad was a big Marvin Harrison, for the Indianapolis Colts for a long time. And Jr. is quite the player, but got injured. And I think that was that obviously hurt Ohio State quite a bit because he was having himself a day early on. But they were smart in the fact that that Georgia's going to get some pressure on you, right? They don't even have to manufacture it. Just that front alone can get it done. But they did a nice job staying in rhythm and getting the ball out quick. And I think that's something you have to do against these guys if you're Max Duggan in this TCU offense.
It is, and we saw the Frogs able to do that a little bit against Michigan, especially in the first half into the third quarter. Obviously, the Frogs tried to park the bus there near the end of the game, try to slow it down, burn some clock. But is this a situation, Coach, where TCU fans and TCU as a team should feel more confident heading into this game because of what they were able to do against Michigan, or is this Georgia defense a totally different beast?
Yeah, I'd say no.
Okay.
They shouldn't.
Right.
They shouldn't feel more confident. I say that half joking. I don't think Michigan's defense is as talented as Georgia, right? Starting there. People have been shown to be able to throw the ball a little bit on them if you get rid of it in time, right? Georgia started off the year, as we know, super hot, just blowing teams out. They beat Oregon to start the season by 43 points. Then they played Samford, not Stanford, but Samford. That was an easy win. But then week 3, they blew out South Carolina.
Oh, okay.
In week 3, I think by 41 points at that point. And they cooled off a little bit, but by their standard, the standard that they set. But this is a good offense. Good defense. I think that TCU, the confidence for them, regardless of who they're playing, and you heard the guys talk a lot about this week in the weekly presser, was the fact that they do a lot on the sports psychology side, and Coach Dykes talked about a lot leading up into the Michigan game. They hadn't played in a bowl game right at that point, and now they're a team that obviously on this huge stage in the college football playoff. I think they just create their own confidence by executing their stuff and making sure that the plan doesn't get too large, right? The play menu doesn't get too large, especially on offense, and they kind of just hone in on what they do. And as Coach Dykes said, dance with the girl who brung you. He said that's what his dad would tell him for advice. And I think that is fitting here. And I think that's to me where the confidence is going to come from. But if you just look strictly at the defense of Georgia, I don't know how much confidence you're going to pull from that. They're pretty darn good.
Well, we see here Ohio State gets it's a positive first play from scrimmage for them. And what do we see moving forward here?
Yeah, so they pick up a first down right away. They go in a similar formation, except now with an H-back, but they get trips, and they go ahead and motion to 2-by-2 again. So almost identical, the same formation. The last play, they went quarters in coverage. Here they bring one linebacker inside. You can see that. They're constantly bringing, they've got the size at linebacker, Jamie, to almost be, when they bring an extra rusher, a fourth rusher inside, it's almost like having another interior D lineman, right? It's not like, if they get stoned by an offensive lineman, they still can get some movement because of their size. So they go ahead and bring one here. And, what I think is interesting, if you watch this, so you got this guy was already on a blitz. This linebacker here sees pull, so he's getting over the top. But if you look up top here, I think they do a really nice job. He's going to match the H-back. So as the H-back pulls in this, along with the guard, they've got counter going. Okay, he's going to insert himself over here as well. So they do a nice job, this Georgia defense, of matching hats. And so if you want to pull guys over there, well, we're going to bring our defenders over there as well. And so, you can do some things. If you're TCU, you can kind of play off of that, right? If you know that, then you can got to do some misdirection where you get some pullers, get them coming over here, and then go the opposite direction. I think Ohio State does a little bit of that later in this game. We'll see how Georgia adjusts to that this week. But something just to take a look at and to keep in mind for these guys. So they only get a yard there. They end up 2nd and 9. And right here, you see a little bit of two-man, okay? So you see man underneath here. Okay, this is all man coverage, and then these guys, these two safeties are playing off the hash. Okay, and they each have a deep half. These guys will take the back out. We'll see that here in a second, or the H-back that comes out. Okay, what they do is, as soon as he motions in, they just switch responsibilities rather than getting crossed up. Man underneath. And then, they just misfire. It was one of the early on. It was one of Stroud's only misfires. Honestly, he was having a heck of a game, especially in this first half.
Yes, C.J. Stroud, Heisman finalist alongside TCU's Max Duggan, obviously had a really good game. Kept Ohio State in front of Georgia for the bulk of this game. Actually, rare incompletion from him on the day in this first drive.
Yeah, and you'll see again, even though they misfire here, you can tell what they're trying to do, and I think TCU will try and mimic this quite a bit. He just stays in rhythm. It's 1, 2, 3, hitch, throw, right? And you see it quick, so you just see 1, 2, 3, hitch, and he rips it. He's about a half second late, but again, with these defenders plastered to him, there is a little bit of hesitation there for that reason. So no gain there. Excuse me, it was 2nd and 7. So now it brings up 3rd and 7. And you got empty now. So it's, what is your empty plan? And this comes from when you look at Kirby Smart here. Obviously he's the head coach. He's not calling the defense, but let's face it, this is a Kirby Smart defense. Mm-hmm. And then, you have that lineage really from a lot of these coaches coming from Nick Saban. And so a lot of this influence, of course, is Nick Saban. And so he'll do a lot of this where he'll mug up a linebacker versus empty, try and give you a different look. You don't know who's coming, who's dropping. And so they do that here, and then they just twist these guys. You'll see the nose here cross face. You're going to see him cross face of the center. So as soon as he does that, the linebacker crosses face. He crosses face of the center here and the guard, and they bring this linebacker down the other way. And you have a clear shot. Now, when you look at it, it looks like, you got all these guys coming at you, but when you boil it down, because these two drop off and sort of wall the outsides, they're going to play wall, coverage here and try and wall from coming on the inside. It's only a 4-man rush. Mm-hmm. And so, again, all these simulated pressures from Georgia, they throw tons of games and stunts at you. That's going to be a tremendous challenge. Coach Ricker and that offensive line, leading up to this one all week, has been just repping all these different blitzes and pressures. A lot of times you can do that and walk through just to get multiple reps. You try and go at sort of a rapid pace, but it's still walk through because it's all about assignments at this point in the year. Your fundamentals, I hate to say it, but they are what they are, right? You're continually harping on those, but you're playing with the fundamentals you've built all season, so you better get your assignment correct.
And as we've talked with Coach Ricker and some of these offensive linemen throughout the year, we kind of have a pretty good understanding of their rules as an offensive line. They don't really go out there and not to say they don't make adjustments, but they go out there, they follow the rules that they have. Like you said, they've got their foundation, and it is what it is at this point. But it'll be a really interesting battle for sure to see this interior of TCU's offensive line, which throughout the season has been so good. There were some struggles against that Michigan front that we definitely saw, especially from that kind of right side of the line. But this, like you said, is a whole other beast to see TCU go up against.
Yeah, and I don't anticipate a lot of empty from TCU, right? To in 5-man protection, just for this reason, right? Creating these simulated pressures are really tough.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work to get those worked out throughout the week, and how much time you're going to invest in that to how much you're going to run it is always the question, right? It's always the debate. And to kind of piggyback off what you were saying, Jamie, what you're saying is, hey, look, they're not going to block the front necessarily. They don't make the rules based on the front. It's really every man down the line, whether they're covered, uncovered, if they have a linebacker up, if they have a safety capped off on top. It's all kind of their individual silos as they go down, and then it sort of marries itself together. And so that's been Coach Ricker's approach, and I think that way there, no matter what you throw at it, you can't say, okay, I haven't seen this front before. Well, we don't care what that is as a whole necessarily. It's kind of piece whole that way there.
Yeah.
So anyhow, but that's kind of,
and it plays into that larger mantra that Sonny Dykes has of just do your job, right? These linemen have worked on these rules all year. If they go out there and they do their job, TCU should have a chance.
For sure. You're going to see down here, we talked a lot about Marvin Harrison Jr. because TCU has their own version of that, right? In Quentin Johnston, very similar in terms of a star receiver and how they're going to handle it. And what Georgia tries to do a lot here, and we've already seen a little bit on film, and this one here is try and double cover in different ways their star receiver. And so, Ohio State to the contrary, they're motioning over to trips to try and get single coverage over here, right? For that reason, they're going to drop. Georgia's going to. It's just this chess match. They're going to drop off into the flat here. Going to drop him off and then cover him over the top and try and double cover. It doesn't matter here. This is a. I know we're not here to break down Ohio State. This is really impressive. Really nice route, and even in that double coverage, you're able to find some green grass. And so you just got to know, if you're TCU, you've got to identify some of this stuff pre-snap, because he's going to play hard inside leverage as a corner because he has help underneath from this linebacker. Okay, so because he knows that, he's playing hard inside leverage. Okay, well, if you know all this, you've done your homework, you've studied the film, and you're Max Duggan, well, the best route versus that, you don't want to run a post because you'll right into leverage, right? The best route is to run some kind of out route, right? Because, go ahead, and what they do is just this cheap play fake. If you see, he freezes him just for a second. Had they not run the play fake, he would already be a lot deeper. Mm-hmm. And because he's deeper, it'd be a harder throw to throw over the top. This hold him for a split second. He gets underneath. Okay, you see Georgia here in inside leverage at corner. All right, and he's able to run that sail route and find green grass. So it's all about understanding what type of double coverage they're going to go against Quentin Johnson and what you're up against, and you can still find ways to get him the football, right? Mm-hmm. And Ohio State does a good job of that. I expect TCU to find ways to get QJ the ball as well.
It'll be really important for TCU to get Quentin Johnson involved. That's probably the most obvious statement that's been made on Facing the Frogs all season, but right. It is what it is, and we've seen TCU find creative ways to get QJ the ball, even when he's been double covered throughout the season. So it'll be interesting to see how Garrett Riley and his staff game plan for that this week. Yeah,
and you see a lot, again from Georgia here. This is the next one, Jamie, on 1st and 10. Another cross blitz. They love these kind of braided twists, bringing guys from all over. And then this is another, something else to look at here. Had the back gone this way, then this edge over here would have peeled with the back. I'm sorry about the film here. Excuse me. So had he gone this way, then this edge would have peeled. But since he came across the formation, now you get a dropper here on this side instead. So that's how they're going to do that. So that's something you can play off of, because now all of a sudden you can run some things where it looks like it's a pass play. You get an end to peel and you shovel it underneath and things like that, where you kind of get a softer edge. You can manipulate things offensively, and I think TCU will look to do that after seeing this tape for sure. So here, another, finding kind of that same area. This is something that I think TCU will copy. This is something it's in their repertoire, just running simple crossing routes. You got one underneath, so just kind of a high-low on crossers. They take the deeper cross for a big gain. And so now, again, it's they find themselves 1st and 10. Georgia again in that two-man. We haven't seen a lot of that this year in coverage. This is a very big 7-on-7 coverage, right? Because it's a heavy coverage team. You can only do that if you've got 4 guys that can rush the passer, and Georgia has those guys.
Absolutely,
right?
they do.
Because that's the downside, right? You're playing a heavy coverage, but you got to hold up for a long time because you're only rushing 4. But again, when you've got that kind of talent up front, it helps quite a bit.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty funny in TCU's press conference this week when Wes Harris was asked about this Georgia front. He didn't really beat around the bush or use too many words. He just said they're legit, and I think when you look at the film, that's pretty clear to see.
Sure, and you can see the man underneath. Ohio State does this a bunch. Again, I would expect TCU to do this as well. They run a lot of man indicators for motion, and so this is a nice idea. They got them in 2-man. They know that because they set the formation in the boundary. Set the formation in the boundary, they see that extra overhang is over here. If it was in zone, you necessarily wouldn't be over here lined up right over that number 2 receiver. So you're thinking man already, but to guarantee that, they motion him across, and now you get that extra nickel defender over here, and then they run the ball back to the boundary where they started. So they displace one defender and run the ball over there. I think, again, if you can get these pre-snap indicators, because really why you motion are for 2 major things. It's either for indicators or to gain some sort of leverage, right? So it's either leverage or for the defense to tell you something and show their hand, and that's what they do here. And I think this is something that TCU will certainly take a look at.
Anything you can do to lighten that box just a little bit, give Amari DiMercato, potentially Kendre Miller if he's healthy enough to play. Just a little bit more space to roam and to run. That'll help keep this TCU offense balanced and moving down the field.
Yeah, no question about it.
All right, Coach, so as Ohio State continues on this drive, what do we see from Georgia's defense? How do they hold up?
Yeah, so last one here I think we're going to take a look at, and they go from trips, motion again, to 2x2. Now, this is, again, Harrison Jr. for Ohio State, but they do a nice job. Ohio State does a nice job in scramble here, and you know, this is a really good job by this offensive line, and you've got to, again, if you're going to beat a Georgia team, then you have to be able to hold up a four-man rush. It's a hard thing to do, but if you do, now you can throw the ball a little bit. Once you get into scramble mode, obviously, you know, C.J. Stroud can move around, but so can Max Duggan, and we know that. They were obviously in New York together, but these are guys that can move around the legs and throw on the run, and so, you know, you'd like to get into some of these situations if you can just hold up long enough up front. And this is, you know, while on Facing the Frogs, we're always looking at the opponent, this is sort of a thing of beauty. This is might have been one of the best plays in college football this year. You know, just what Stroud was able to do, and just a flick of the wrist and throw a bullet into the end zone. It's pretty amazing.
Really good job getting outside the pocket here, and like you said, he threw a strike to Marvin Harrison Jr. for this touchdown. You have to wonder if Harrison Jr. doesn't get knocked out late in that game, if we're not sitting here breaking down this film talking about Stroud and Harrison Jr. right now and the Ohio State Buckeyes. But, you know, even though Georgia gives up a touchdown on this drive, they gave up quite a few touchdowns in that Peach Bowl. They did come out on top. And when you think about, Coach, what you looked at on Dissecting the Frogs this week, two of those plays, you know, you talk about quarterback mobility. One of them was a rushing touchdown for Max Duggan. The other one, a really long completion to Quentin Johnston, where he does a phenomenal job of navigating a pocket that isn't completely clean to get that ball out of his hand and down the field, and we see Stroud put that on display here as well.
Yeah, it's a great point. No, I thought it was one of his best games in terms of keeping, you know, staying within the integrity of the pocket, but subtle pocket movements, not getting too far, because all of a sudden, if you got rush on one side, you start taking large steps to get away from it. You've obviously, running into some other rush. Max made subtle pocket movements and then stepped up at just the right time. But that is a great point. Before we close out here on the Georgia defense, because this is interesting, this is a coverage I don't think we've done here on Facing the Frogs yet this season. So I just want to take a look at this, and then we'll head over to the offense here after the break. But right here, they're going man, no blitz. Now, granted, they bring this linebacker, but it's not a blitz. It's still a four-man rush. So he's just the default fourth rusher. So they bring him. They play man across the board, and so these aren't high safeties. He's actually playing man here. He's playing man here. Okay, and then you get these guys, and they've done something similar to this early on, and they just kind of wall. So what they're trying to do is trying to create or trying to prevent, any kind of in-breaking route of those deep crosses that we saw. And so those guys are there to sort of jam and wall. You got a four-man rush. You got a low hole player for the same reason. So they're really sensitive to those square ins, those deep digs, and those crossing routes, and then playing man everywhere else. And so you'll see that. But what happens is the safety just gets lost on Harrison Jr. in the scramble thing. So he does a nice job. He's running a dig route, but as soon as he sees Stroud break the pocket, okay, you can see him signal to him, and now he works the other way and helps him out.
I can't really blame the safety for getting lost against a receiver like Marvin Harrison Jr. You can only hope that he also gets lost against a guy like Quentin Johnston.
Right, and it goes back to that point, right? You give him enough time, especially against talented guys like Harrison Jr. and Quentin Johnston, they're going to get open, right?
Yeah, eventually they will get open.
That's
we saw that against Michigan. We saw that here in this game as well. And you can only hope as a Frog fan that it happens again in TCU's favor on Monday night. We are going to take a quick break here on Facing the Frogs, but when we come back, Coach Beaudin's going to break down Georgia on the offensive side of the football.
Texas-based Happy Water offers the best-tasting, sugar-free kids drink ever made. Happy Water comes in 4 delicious flavors that you can find at local retailers and on Amazon. Each pouch contains 0 grams of sugar, 0 calories, and 0% juice. Head to happydrinks.com for more information and to purchase Happy Water. That's HAPIdrinks.com. Live happy, be happy, drink happy.
The Flying T Club provides the everyday TCU fan and alum the ability to specifically support TCU student athletes. Flying T Club offers 3 levels of memberships. The Flying T Club is a nonprofit organization supporting the brand development of TCU student athletes through a series of unique event-based networking opportunities, which are exclusive to our members. These events provide a great social engagement tool for our members and student athletes alike. Follow them on Instagram at Flying T Club or online at flyingtclub.com.
Simply the best barbecue in Fort Worth. Dine in, catering, or drive-through. 2900 Montgomery, just off I-30. Remember, the best barbecue in Fort Worth is at Railhead Smokehouse.
For exclusive interviews and content on TCU recruits, subscribe now at frogstoday.com. Any sport, anytime. It's your source for all things TCU. Only on frogstoday.com.
Welcome back into Facing the Frogs. Jamie Plunkett here alongside Coach David Beaudin. We are breaking down TCU's national championship opponent, the Georgia Bulldogs. We've just taken a look at Georgia on the defensive side of the ball, Coach. Now we get to turn to yet another Heisman finalist at quarterback, Stetson Bennett, and how he runs this offense with a pretty significant 3-headed monster at running back there. Coach, as we jump into the offensive side of the ball for Georgia, what do you want to tell us to set the stage?
Yeah, well, you start with, obviously we all know the story of Stetson Bennett. We don't have to retell that. It's going to be told thousands of times this week, and I get it. It is a great story and should be told. But offensively, it starts with their offensive coordinator, Todd Monken. He's the highest-paid offensive coordinator in college football. He used to be the head coach at Southern Miss, and then he went into the NFL, was with the Buccaneers as the OC. But really does a nice job of marrying kind of an old-school NFL pro-style system with a modern-day RPO and does some other things. So it's a really nice marriage. I think for a while there, Georgia, that was their downfall, is their offense wasn't as modernized as it needed to be. And so I think there's a nice blend of that, does a really good job. Tom Monken's been around forever. He's a quarterback years ago at Knox College. Jamie, you know what state that's in, Knox College?
I'm going to say Tennessee. I'm probably wrong.
You are.
Great.
But that's right. We're going to go with Illinois.
Close.
All right, but I'm going to give you a second. Do you know their nickname? The Knox
Knockers.
No, they're not the Knockers, but they are the Prairie Fire. I know that was going to be your second guess.
Totally going to be my
It was right after the
guess.
Knockers. They knocked that out. But no, so that's where we start offensively. Somehow we've gone down a deep, dark rabbit hole. And we get back on track.
Lock
here.
it in. We can do this.
All right, so we've got the running back coach is Dell McGee, guy who played in the league and had been around for a little bit, and Brian McClendon is the wide receiver coach. Anyhow, offensive line guy, Stacy Searles, who's been a college offensive line coach all over the place for about 30 years, does a heck of a job with these big guys up front. And they certainly have big guys. And you talk about the running backs. Georgia obviously has been known for their running backs for many years. And this year is no exception. And also that tight end room is really impressive. A group of tight ends that they use really well. And Coach Sonny Dykes talked about not only are they great, pass catchers, but they're tough guys. They do a great job blocking as well. And so we'll certainly see those guys here. We're going to take a look at their first drive. And, I talked about an RPO to start, and this is one of them, Jamie. So I want to look at this quickly. And so they makes it nice and easy for Stetson Bennett, who's obviously – a guy who's got a lot of experience, but still continues to make the offense pretty easy for him for that decision making. And I think that's a nice job. There's genius and simplicity. But what they're doing is when you run these RPOs, you want to talk about it in this way: is what field do I want to play on? You want to break the field up into three sections. Okay, so they're going to run a speed out up top here. All right, simple speed out. If you've got free access, which they do, the ball's going to go there. We'll talk about that in a second. The second one is the run play. They're just running a simple zone play here, okay? And the last one, they're running a quick screen down bottom, all right, down this field here. And so pre-snap, you want to say, okay, what field do I want to play on? Do I have free access? Okay, and what I mean by that is the corner off, and you can see the corner bailing. and there's no overhang. This overhang is now creeping towards the box. So automatically you know the ball's going there right now. And that's all Stetson Bennett is doing. The offensive line, they're still running outside zone. Nothing's changed for them. The running back, he doesn't get a call. Maybe Bennett gives him what they call like a me call, or he taps his shoulders, tell him, hey, I'm throwing this thing so he gets out of the way. But as soon as he sees Bennett's shoulders turn, he knows to get out of the way on the run. Okay, so that run call still exists. They see 3 over here, so they know they're not going to the screen. He's going to take this one right now and just simply throw it. Now, you're going to take some shots, right? When you run these RPOs, this is the unblocked defender. This unblocked defender is the read key if it was a run. So you better get rid of it, in time, because you're going to take a shot. Now, the nice part is when you got a guy like Donnie Mitchell up there who's 6'4", 190 pounds, he all of a sudden takes a simple speed out, and now, it's a first down. He just runs into it, picks up a nice gain. He's a guy out of Missouri City, Texas, that certainly, I think now the way TCU's recruiting is going, you're going to start getting guys like that to stay in state and play at TCU.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this transfer cycle, more than anything else, is an indicator of that, Coach. We've talked a little bit about the transfers that TCU has been able to bring in this season. You've got Tommy Brockermeyer, an offensive lineman from Alabama, who's a former 5-star kid. We talked, earlier this week on the site. You can read the article that we put together about, another former 5-star, Trey Sanders, being on campus this week. You've got an LSU kid that's committed to TCU. You've got, another Alabama kid that's committed to TCU, JoJo Earl, who's from the area. Everything is trending in the right direction from a recruiting standpoint for the Horned Frogs. And a game like this, regardless of outcome, frankly, is only going to push it further in that direction.
Yeah, no question. I completely agree. They're starting to win recruiting battles against some of those blue bloods, and when you win and you get into play on a national stage, that stuff, is going to have that type of effect.
Absolutely.
So looking at this one here, Jamie, is actually, we've seen all kinds of RSOs, RPOs. This one is an SPO. So we're going to go a screen pass option. So right now your first thing is throw this swing screen. So for Georgia, they're going to try and throw this. But as soon as they see this defensive end, and more importantly, this backer kind of getting out this way, then they're going to come back and just throw a simple turnout route, okay, to Rosemary Jack Saint. He's a guy out of St. Thomas Aquinas, Florida, powerhouse prep program. But again, another big receiver. You see him go up and extend and get the football. And so, again, keeping it simple, able to play fast. This is a Georgia offense that you didn't see this from 3 years ago, right? Even though they were playing at a high level, this was kind of what was keeping them out, was not being able to get into sets like this where they can play fast, just have simple reads for the quarterback. They're doing that now, and that's a scary thing if you're TCU this week.
It is a scary thing for TCU because, you think about the secondary and what Michigan was able to do at times against them, especially their safeties. You're going to have to find a way for TCU to mitigate some of those same things in this game.
So you'll see here, Stetson Bennett just drops his hands, to signal the shift, and all of a sudden it goes from bunch trips up top to bunch trips down bottom. He rolls in, the running back flips sides, and all of a sudden, you get this receiver to get out a little bit wider, and really all they're doing is, this is very similar to TCU. We talked about that on Dissecting the Frogs, that 46-yard completion to Quentin Johnston. Well, here, they're doing the same type of thing. Instead of pulling a guard, they're faking the zone, the split zone, bringing the tight end on the other side. So you end up, if you include the back, you end up in a 7-man protection, a 3-man route, and they're just running that deep crossing route, which they love. And so, you can see Bennett sort of doing the same thing, just sort of moving in the pocket until he pops open. And so you've got to get some pressure on these guys, on Bennett, because if you give them this much time with these receivers, they're going to pick you apart. And it's going to be, you're in for a long day. So you've got to find a way to manufacture some pressure. And then the other thing is just keep them behind the chains and not play on schedule. If you can have some plays where you can roll the dice just a little bit to get them behind, then they can't get into this rhythm offensively. And I think that's going to be a big thing for TCU.
You talk about defensive pressure, getting them behind the chains. That's one thing TCU did really well against Michigan, that Joe Moore award-winning offensive line for that award is given every year to the best offensive line in the country. Michigan's won it twice in a row. And you still had Dylan Horton coming away with 4 sacks, and you had TCU coming away with 13 tackles for loss in that game. Those numbers stood out and were kind of proof that even against a quote-unquote elite-level offensive line, TCU is still capable from that 3-3-5 scheme of doing that, getting pressure and hitting people behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. They really stepped up as a defense. I mean, it was impressive what they did against Michigan. And you're right, if they can do some of those same things, and also with D. Winters playing on the edge, quite a bit. His speed, I think, against these massive offensive tackles, you can do a really good job just getting off the ball with a guy like that who's really found his groove. I think he had all year as a linebacker, but as an edge player, when he's asked to do that, he's really taken his game to another level at that spot.
Absolutely. And, we heard from Dylan Horton this week in the TCU presser. Didn't hear from D. Winters, but I think Horton said something that you can probably apply to Winters as well because, we all know Dylan was a safety in high school, played linebacker at New Mexico, and he's transferred down onto that edge here at TCU. And he talked about how much better he has of just a overall concept of defense. He has a better understanding the closer he's gotten to the football because he's had that experience at different levels of a defense. You almost see that same thing happening with D. Winters here too. Now that he's been playing up near the line of scrimmage, closer to the football these last couple of games, he understands where the guys around him are going to be, and he understands when he can take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. He understands the big picture of the defense and how Dylan Horton talked about how he fits into that big picture now. And I think that's really important because when you talk about D. Winters learning that, and I think a lot of these guys, by having such versatility, kind of moving around, playing different spots, one guy goes down, all of a sudden, you see Johnny Hodges throughout the year is going to move to the middle. He was, that stack, outside stack, all those things. It's important to know not only what your job is, and of course the mantra of the team has been do your job. You need to know what that is, but you also need to know how you fit in to the overall defense, right? What are you doing that's going to impact the guy next to you? And you can only do that really by getting game experience at different spots. That's going to really bode well for this group as they head into this huge game.
Absolutely.
So we look here. It's right now. It's 1st and 10 again. They misfire here, but really this is just a good example of how much confidence that Bennett has in these receivers. A lot of times they're just going to throw, even though they're covered. He's covered here. They're going to try and throw some back shoulders. So they're going to really challenge these corners. Trey Hodges-Tomlinson and Josh Newton on the edge, who've played outstanding football. But it's going to be a big game for them because even if they're covered, doesn't mean the ball's not coming their way because Bennett has thrown so many balls to these receivers that I wouldn't be surprised if they're blanketed. They're still going to take a shot and have these big, tall receivers try and come up with it.
Yeah, let's pause here for a second and talk about a guy who I know you love, Josh Newton.
Heck yeah, let's do it.
Josh Newton didn't face a target against Michigan. And part of that is because, and you pointed this out to me off camera just in a conversation we had the other day about what he was doing at the line of scrimmage. When you look at the size of Georgia's receivers and what they're able to do, will he be able to do some of the same things on the line of scrimmage against these guys as far as being physical and getting in their face?
Yeah, I think he's that talented. I mean, he's a guy that, I don't know if it's going to be no targets, right? I think for this reason, I think Georgia will still kind of take a little bit more, kind of roll the dice a little bit, those guys. And I think Josh Newton will welcome that challenge. But he can match that physicality for sure because regardless, that's where you can kind of negate that size a little bit. If you can get a great jam at the line of scrimmage, you're not battling for those balls down the field necessarily. That's where you get in some trouble, if you just give them a free release. And so I think they do a really good job there. And then Trey Hodges-Tomlinson has shown all year long they usually try and get a bigger receiver matched up against them and take some shots. And again, he's done a really good job playing through the hands and through the arms of those receivers and to be able to, again, negate a little bit of that height disadvantage. But I think, TCU we're going to see defensively when they do get in man, it's going to be more of a match man concept where regardless of where they are, they're going to have a man that they're responsible for as opposed to saying, hey, I'm on the left, you're on the right. They're going to try and match up and try and use that a little bit more to their advantage.
And we haven't talked about that specific concept a lot this year, but that is something that is wholly different from how TCU's defense would operate under Gary Patterson, where you were assigned a side of the field as a corner, and regardless of who came over there, that was your guy. I feel like there were times throughout Patterson's tenure here where he did not have his best man on their best man simply because of that rule. Obviously, it worked out more often than not in the 20 years that Patterson was here, but maybe it offers a little bit more flexibility with the way Gillespie runs things.
Yeah, I think it does. And I think in zone, you really don't know. You can't manipulate it, but certainly in man, it's almost like pickup basketball, right? I mean, I know I'm boiling it down to a very simple form, but that's what it becomes when you play match man. You just say going into the game, like, hey, regardless of where you are. Now, I can understand the flip side of it, what you're talking about as well, because it does mess a little bit with the structure of the defense. So all of a sudden you put, let's say quads to one side, you've got 4 guys lined up, you have to match the 4 defenders. And so, it can mess things a little bit, and to try and make sure that it fits into the overall scheme, you've got to be careful, and that's why you can't live in it every single play. You've got to pick your spots, and I think Joe Gillespie will do that.
Perfect. Well, let's keep running this, see if we can't see anything else from Georgia.
Sure, we go. So now we're down here. They missed there, so it's 2nd and 10. I'm going to take a good look here at a matchup nightmare. So Darnell Washington, the tight end, you can see him. He's a number 3 receiver right here. Okay, he wears number 1. He is, Jamie, 6'7", 270 pounds. He's a tight end. Let me repeat that. He's 6'7", 270 pounds.
It's a big boy.
He is large. And you kind of see it here.
It was like a Mack truck.
And so it's hard for Bennett to miss. So as soon as he shows his numbers, he gets the ball and just gets down. But who in the right mind wants to tackle that? It's a tough deal. So, they do a good job with him and really all their tight ends. I mean, look at this guy right here.
Goodness.
Yes. It looks like they split out another tackle.
This is why I'm glad we sit in this studio. We
No
don't
doubt.
Put on helmets.
There's no question. But they do a nice job of just finding soft spots and zones and sitting down. And so, you've got to mix things up. And I think TCU will do that. They've shown that throughout the year. Just keep mixing up coverages so they can't just pick you apart sitting in soft zone.
So they get, I believe they get enough for a first down here on this play as the drive keeps on rolling.
Yeah, they might be one short. I think it's 3rd and 1. I think this brings up 3rd and 1 here. But, again, they just go to zone. Now, I'm going to go back to the same thing when we started with the RPO. Okay? This is 3rd and 1, and they're going to kind of pick their poison in terms of what fields you want to play on. All right, now, it ends up being just old-school option football, and I'll show you that in a second. It tends to be a loss for Georgia, but what they'll do is if you've got 2 over 2 here, if he would have got snapped earlier, then the ball should have went out here, just a one-step by the receiver, throw it out there. You can see this guy's traveling, so it's a little bit too late for that, so that's off the table. If they like the numbers here pre-snap, he could just catch it and rip it here as well. Okay, if he thinks, okay, they've got 2 over 2, we're going to play football now. So now we're going to play football in the middle of the field. They run zone here and read the end. If the end crashes, he's going to pull it, but now this is not off the table again. All right, all this is it's the same thing as if you had another running back running that option path. It's the same idea. You would just throw it out to him late. So this is your read key for Georgia, and this is your pitch key technically. Okay, the next level. So that's your pitch key. As soon as he shows, okay, he should flip this thing out here now, and he'd be able to take off. But it's easy for me to say again, sitting here in the studio, right? But that's where the ball should go. He ends up missing that one and end up with a loss. But again, that's modern day option football, and Georgia does it well. And it's another element. They've added another element to their powerful offense in the last couple of years that makes things really dangerous. And really, to me, that was the key piece they were missing, and what kept them from finishing the deal. But ultimately, they did last year as the national champs.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how Gillespie draws up a defense to kind of defend that a little bit. That Georgia drive ends on the next play where they end up missing a field goal. And so we're going to jump now to the Bulldogs' second possession to see a little bit about this drive, what they try to do here.
Yeah, they do, Ohio State does a nice job, and you're going to have to watch this because they don't want to go to false key here. So they got this guy blocking down. In the past, defenses would just squeeze right now, and that's what Georgia was banking on here on this little touch pass, jet sweep, and they'd get outside of it. He'd be able to block the linebacker at the next level, and away we go. Well, he stays disciplined, comes up the field here at defensive end, and so he's able to hit this thing for a loss. This is some of the stuff that you saw D. Winters doing, just shooting things right now against Michigan, that you hope you can get the same kind of production and same results against Georgia.
We had a chance to talk to Johnny Hodges midweek, and he talked about the look that he saw in D. Winters' eye in that Michigan game. Said he saw it again in practice this week from Winters, so hopefully we do see a repeat performance from number 13. That would be absolutely massive for the Frogs.
Absolutely. So last one here we're going to take a look at, Jamie. Just it's 2nd and 17. They like to go to kind of a traditional slow screen. This is running back Kenny McIntosh. He's the veteran of the group, but he leads the team in rushing, but also he's third on the team in receiving. And so a guy that you have to worry about not only handing the ball off to, but a dangerous weapon coming out of the backfield. Here, Illinois picks up, gets back to about the line of scrimmage, but again, someone you want to pay attention to in the pass game as well. So, defensively, Jamie, we looked at a really stout defense that does all kinds of things defensively, schematically, and has the physical skill set. And then offensively, it's really now no different. Throwing a lot at you, a lot you have to account for, and they've got the personnel to do it. I think this is going to be an exciting matchup. I still go back to TCU for me as a team, and I keep saying this, but it's worth repeating. It's just a team that plays together, plays as a team, but also plays really good complementary football, and that's why they're in the position they are now. And I think that's going to be exciting to watch, against all these 5 stars and whatnot, for a team to come in and just be so tight-knit and see what they can do against this team.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that this is an uphill battle for the Frogs against, not even arguably, the best competition they will have seen all season long. Defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs, national champion and Heisman finalists in Stetson Bennett leading this offense. Just 5 stars all over the field on defense. Multiple guys going to the NFL from that side of the football as well. But Coach, as we kind of wrap up our final Facing the Frogs for the 22-23 season, I just want to say it's been a pleasure. Thanks for letting us into your mind a little bit as we get to see you break down film. Folks, you can watch all of our other Facing the Frogs if you want to go back and reminisce. You can watch Coach Beaudin over at Dissecting the Frogs, where he takes a look at TCU's past performances as well. You can read all of his work. You can read my work, the work of Jeff Wilson, Melissa Treebwasser, Drew Davison, and so many others over at frogstoday.com. Right now, your first month is just $1 as we close out TCU's football season and start to turn our attention after this week to basketball, baseball, and all of those wonderful spring sports that the Horned Frogs have. For Coach David Beaudin, I'm Jamie Plunkett. Thanks for being on this journey with us this year. We can't wait until it's time to jump into another season of Facing the Frogs in 2023. Go Frogs.
Roxo Media House.